The most expensive house in the entire world, 775 rooms, literal walls of gold. So why does King Charles run away from it every single night just to sleep in a much smaller house?
Right, is Buckingham Palace actually a magnificent royal home? Or is it a 260-year-old trap that no monarch has ever been able to escape? Well, today we are unlocking the doors to this beautiful prison that British royalty has always kept tightly shut. And hey, before we reveal the dark reality behind those famous gates, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more explainers exactly like this one.
Seriously though, picture this for a second. If you had 24/7 access to a massive palace, complete with 39 acres of totally private gardens right in the dead center of London, would you ever leave? Let us know in the comments right now. You'd probably think, no way, I'm staying forever, right? But actually scratch that. What if I told you the truth behind those majestic walls is so incredibly uncomfortable, it's forced almost every single monarch to literally flee? The answer is hiding right beneath the floorboards, and trust me, it is definitely not what you're expecting. Okay, let's just start with this absolute beast of a number. 775. That is the number of rooms inside Buckingham Palace. I mean, it requires an absolute army, literally 800 staff members, just to keep the lights on and the floors swept. It's the most globally recognized royal residence on the planet. But here's the massive paradox, guys. No monarch who has ever lived there has actually wanted to stay. Every single one has tried to escape it. And to understand why, we really have to look at what this grand building was actually built on in the first place.
So there's this massive disconnect here. The public, we just see the golden drawing rooms, the glamour, the famous balcony. But the private reality, it's basically a labyrinth of freezing cold corridors built directly over a buried swamp.
Yeah, exactly. Back in 1703, long before there was ever a palace, this land was just a marsh fed by a subterranean river called the Tyburn. It was low-lying, it was soaking wet, and most importantly for our story, it was cheap. So how on earth did a damp, soggy swamp turn into the crown jewel of the British monarchy?
Well, it all started with a mere £7,000. That is all it cost John Sheffield, the Duke of Buckingham, to build a pretty handsome, normal brick townhouse right at the end of that swampy avenue. Right, and it was just a private home. No massive throne room, no grand ballroom. Just a comfortable spot for an ambitious duke who wanted a nice view of St. James's Park. But you know, that's swampy underneath. It was never going to dry up. And the ultimate trap was just waiting to be set by a young king who was desperately looking for a nice family home. And this is exactly where the trap was legally forged. In 1760, George III signed a sovereign debt agreement. He basically surrendered the hereditary revenues of the crown over to Parliament in exchange for a fixed yearly salary.
Yep.
And then, just 1 year later, he bought the Duke's house for £21,000. But here's the catch. By giving up his financial independence, he tied the fate of this house completely to politicians. And, as the royals would very quickly discover, politicians are super generous when it comes to public ceremony, but they are incredibly miserly when it comes to paying for basic plumbing. What happened next completely ruined the royal budget. So, fast forward a bit to his son, George IV. He wanted a masterpiece. Parliament gave him a very strict budget of £150,000 to upgrade the house into a palace. And he completely blew right past that. He ended up spending an astronomical £700,000. He essentially wrapped this old, damp brick house in golden ceilings and crimson silk. But the tragic irony? He grew sick and died without spending a single night in the magnificent cage he just built. So who inherited this wildly expensive, totally uncomfortable mess? Well, the next king, William IV, absolutely hated it, like despised it. He literally declared that the nation needed a legislature way more than he needed gilded drawing rooms. And get this, he actually tried to give the palace away to the government. He thought the building was completely useless for a normal, comfortable life. But the government flat out refused to take it. So the state wouldn't take it, the crown couldn't use it, and the cycle of misery officially began. And if you think that sounds bad, wait until you hear what an 18-year-old queen faced when she was forced to move in. When Queen Victoria moved in, her life was anything but luxurious. I mean, it was absolute dysfunction. Chimneys smoked so badly they completely ruined the walls, windows were bolted shut by mistake. Oh, and some rooms were entirely missing doors. Not to mention, because the kitchens were literally a labyrinth away, food always arrived stone cold, plus the staff was divided into these warring, overlapping departments. If a window broke, the inside cleaner and the outside cleaner would just argue over who had to fix it, while the queen was literally freezing in her own living room. So things were basically falling apart until Victoria married Prince Albert. He came in, audited the staggering waste, and forced some actual order into the chaos. But here is a fascinating twist for you. The famous balcony we all know today?
Yeah, it wasn't built for glorious royal waves to the public at all. Albert desperately needed to enclose the damp, miserable courtyard just to make room for their 9 children. The balcony was simply a practical architectural band-aid to manage a building that completely resisted being managed. But even Albert's clever fixes couldn't save what happened next.
When Prince Albert died at just 42 years old, Victoria was completely devastated. She abandoned the palace entirely, literally letting it sit there and rot for 40 years. And there's this hidden secret that brilliantly illustrates just how suffocating the palace truly was for her. Even today, there's a secret door disguised as a mirrored cabinet in the White Drawing Room. It was built to allow the monarch to vanish from the heavy protocols of the staterooms without being seen. The palace offered no honest exit, only these secret escapes. So, after Victoria's 40-year absence, her son, Edward VII, finally took over, and he brought in the champagne, the electric lights, and these massive 170-guest banquets to basically mask the creeping damp and mold that had just taken over the walls. But it was all just an illusion. Edward didn't even want to live there either. He slept at a smaller, way warmer home down the street and essentially just used Buckingham Palace as a giant office. He performed his kingship there, sure, but the building's bones were still rotting underneath, and it was about to require a truly desperate cover-up. By 1913, the smog and heavy pollution of London had just eaten away at the palace's original soft stone. It looked absolutely terrible from the street. So what did they do? They slapped on a new, hard Portland stone facade. And the crazy part? That iconic front of the palace you see in literally every photograph today, it was hastily built in just 13 weeks while the royal household was still living inside. But that fresh new wall was about to face its ultimate test. The Second World War arrived. On September 13, 1940, a German aircraft flew right up the mall and dropped 5 high-explosive bombs directly onto the palace while the king and queen were actually inside.
And they famously refused to leave. Surviving 9 direct hits throughout the war gave the palace this massive new moral authority, It became a symbol of shared suffering with the British public. But structurally? Oh, it was devastating. The hasty, jury-rigged electrical and plumbing patches they made during the war basically became permanent fixtures for the next 70 years. And that set up a completely new disaster.
Because of those terrible wartime patches, the palace became freezing cold. King George VI literally called it the icebox.
It was so intensely cold that staff had to wear heavy winter coats indoors. Family members were separated by these vast, unheated corridors, completely unable to communicate without sending written notes through servants. The sheer scale of the building totally destroyed any chance of human intimacy. Which brings us to the reign of Queen Elizabeth II.
When a 25-year-old Elizabeth inherited the throne, she was living in a warm, comfortable home called Clarence House. She practically begged Prime Minister Winston Churchill to let her stay there.
But Churchill flat out refused. He told her the sovereign absolutely must reside at Buckingham Palace. She was forced out of her beloved home and straight into the decaying icebox out of sheer institutional obligation. She adapted, of course, but the building continued to silently decay around her, leading to a massive public breaking point.
In 1992, Windsor Castle caught fire, causing £37 million in damage. But when the public was asked to foot the bill for it during a major economic recession, there was total, absolute outrage. The result? For the first time in history, the Queen was forced to turn her decaying private prison into a literal tourist attraction. In 1993, the doors were open to ticket holders for just £8 to fund the massive repairs. The building that no monarch ever actually wanted to live in was now a museum for strangers. But here's the thing. The ticket sales couldn't fix the deep rot hidden inside the walls. By 2016, a staggering 92% of the electrical boards had exceeded their design life. 92%! That meant a single stray spark could trigger a catastrophic £250 million electrical fire. The building that had bravely survived 16 bomb strikes was now threatening to burn itself down simply because its wires were ancient. And the cost to fix this was about to completely shock the nation. This crisis forced the government to launch a staggering £369 million resurfacing program. They literally had to raise the sovereign grant from 15% to 25% just to keep the palace from physically crumbling. It's just a permanent financial black hole. Whether someone actually sleeps there or not, the heating, the 800 staff members, and the 39 acres of gardens require constant, endless funding. The nation is completely trapped into paying for it because letting the physical fabric of the state dissolve is just politically impossible. Which loops us right back to the very beginning of this explainer.
Today, King Charles III works at the freezing, massive construction zone of Buckingham Palace, but every single night he walks 5 minutes down the road to sleep at the small, warm Clarence house.
Right, and the official excuse is the ongoing renovation, but come on, the truth is he is just maintaining a 260-year unbroken streak. From George IV to Victoria to Elizabeth and now Charles, every single monarch arrives, discovers the impossible scale of the place, and immediately finds a way to live somewhere else.
The absolutely crucial point here is the tyranny of sheer institutional obligation. The palace survives not because anyone actually loves it, but because the state requires a grand stage for its endless rituals.
Exactly. State banquets, ambassador meetings, and massive public addresses. They have to happen somewhere. It is essentially a machine that processes monarchy, completely indifferent to the misery of the actual human beings who are forced to live inside it day after day.
And that brings us to our final realization, showing how this all builds right back to where we started. Beneath those 39 acres of meticulously kept gardens and golden ceilings, the original subterranean swamp still exists. The Tyburn River still flows right underneath the courtyard, exactly as it did back in 1703. Think about it. It outlasted the Duke, it outlasted Victoria, and it will quietly outlast every single royal prisoner who tries to tame the massive building above it. The river doesn't care, and honestly, neither does the palace. So we want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Tell us, if you were offered $10 million a year, would you choose to live in the freezing, golden prison of Buckingham Palace, knowing all its hidden secrets? Drop your honest answers in the comments below. We really want to know what you think. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we will see you